Freeman. Revis. Mitchell. Ortiz. Berkowitz. Here. Hickey. Costa. Van Dyne.
Present.
We do not have a. Oh, I'm sorry, don't, I'm sorry, I got this list this morning. Bullock? Thank you.
And I believe Ms. Ogala, you can add her to the roll as well. And I don't believe that we do need a quorum because there will not be anything to vote on. So, okay. How many members present?
Nine.
9 members present. Okay. 10?
Okay. I'll make sure I get everybody as I go through.
10 members present. Okay, thank you. All right. Like I said, good morning. Committee of the Whole, we do have 3 different entities that would like to give us a presentation this morning. So we will start off with the PACE annual budget presentation. And I would like to welcome Rick Kwasniewski and his crew or staff. Welcome, folks. If you hit the speaker button down there, it should turn you on to red. There you go.
Good?
Yep, you're all set,
All
sir.
right, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Speaker Van Dyne and members of the County Board. I'm Rick Kwasniewski, the Chairman of PACE Suburban Bus. With me here today is our Executive Director, Melinda Metzger, and also Beth Gonzalez, the Will County Community Relations Representative is here as well. We're here today to talk a little bit about our 2025 budget, but before we do that, I'd like to talk about a couple of things that took place in 2024. It's been a pretty transformative year for us at PACE, and we've had a great ability to adapt we've had the ability to adapt, which has been one of our greatest strengths. Over our 40-year history, we've consistently evolved to move our riders and meet our riders' needs, but 2024 really stands out. Fixed route ridership is surged to 20%, the highest it's been since the pandemic. And ADA paratransit is now 8% above pre-pandemic levels. So we're getting back to whatever somebody might consider normal, even though it's a lot different. And I think you're going to hear that from both us and Metra that, you know, days of the week don't make a difference anymore. We have to really adapt our services. I wanted to share with you several innovative steps PACE took in the past year that have fueled this resurgence. Thanks to our continued investments and partnerships with obviously the county boards throughout the region and especially Will County, we've been able to do a number of things during the course of the year. This year, we provided support for demand response services, including county-wide level grants, enhancing county-wide services throughout our region. We're also proud to partner with Will County on the rebranded Access Will County service. This important expansion to seniors and people with disabilities in Wilmington, the city of Braidwood, and 6 new townships in southwest Will County creates more accessible dial-a-ride service for the residents who depend on PACE services and need it the most. And next year, we're going to again, Melinda will talk about it as well, we're going to be reinvesting another $200,000 to Will County to support demand response services as well. So we appreciate all of your support, past support, and we look forward to working with you in the future. We've also expanded our service options for our riders, including on Route 755, 850, 851, 853, all of which operate on the I-55 bus-on-shoulder corridor. Riders have today more travel options and significantly more trips to make it more convenient for them. And one of the things we're finding out on those routes as well, which similar to Metra's commuter routes, is different days of the week are heavier than others. So before we used to have same routes every single day. Now we're kind of modifying those and adding on services when we need them the most. And it's basically on ridership requests and needs. We've also kicked off our network restructuring initiative called Revision. We've got that out there. I know we're having a number of public hearings throughout the region, asking for your opinion on changes that we need to make at PACE and how we need to better adapt to all the different parts of the region. We also launched a rideshare access program, which is expanding the mobility options with both Uber and UServe, which is an alternative to the dedicated ADA paratransit service, which is really convenient because people get to go ahead and schedule those on their own, and it's really convenient, and actually it's cheaper for them to be able to utilize those services. In August, we also hosted an Activate Joliet event, which was a family-friendly celebration at the Joliet Transit Center, sponsored by the RTA Station Activation Program. This event really helped highlight the hub in downtown Joliet in Will County. And these continued efforts will continue to work with all of you and take your input. We'd like to kind of move forward with the 2025 budget presentation, which I leave that up to Melinda. She's got all the details. So Melinda Metzger, our Executive Director.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, Will County Board. Good morning, Speaker. I appreciate being here today. And I have to say, good things are happening in Will County, and PACE is here really to help those good things happen. I'm going to go into our budget, and then we'll be happy to take any questions. I'm happy to report that the 2025 suburban service budget is balanced with no fare increases or reductions in service. The funding requirement of $287.5 million is funded by sales tax and other public funds. However, a $41.4 million shortfall in sales tax and operating revenue will be covered using federal corona relief funding. So we need that funding to balance our budget. PACE's ridership is expected to grow next year by 6.1%. The 25 budget includes expanding service options for our riders by adding fixed route transit in high demand markets, expanding our on-demand services, and improving weekend and late night service, which is where we're seeing the growth. We're seeing it on the weekends and later at night. Our service is ending too early. Again, as the chairman has stated, there's shifts in our service and we're adapting to those shifts. We're coordinating with RTA, Metra, and CTA and the regional day pass, which provide unlimited rides on PACE, Metra, and CTA for a single day at a fixed rate. By offering flexible and cost-efficient fare options, we'll continue to attract new riders and provide greater value to existing passengers. So we're anticipating seeing that in the new year. We'll continue to support innovative programs such as our on-demand program. This includes funding to maintain the West Joliet on-demand service. In 2025, we will complete our network restructuring plan called Revision. PACE recognizes that transit travel patterns have changed since the pandemic, and PACE is continuing to adjust our service to meet the needs of the region. PACE is really seeking your input on a reimagined PACE network. We're looking at our entire system, and we need your input and your constituents' input on what you want to see in the transit system. I urge you to put in your newsletters and to all your constituents that they should go onto our website, www.pacebus.com/revision. On there, there's a survey, a very short survey, takes 2 to 5 minutes, asking people what they would like to see in the new service that we're going to be providing in 2026. This is really a fundamental change to anything that we have done. I've been with the system 40 years. First time we've looked at our entire system, and we want the public's input before we decide on what we're going to do. And so that survey needs to be completed by mid-January. And if you need more information, we'll be happy to hand out that we have a code that you can use. We're on our buses asking our riders to give us information. We have transit ambassadors who are going out. And I have to say, Will County has been part of our revision program. We've been meeting with stakeholders to find out what they'd like to see in the new service. So that's one of the most important things that we're doing next year. Our goal is to get it complete by, get the information in middle of the year. We're going to start pulling it all together, get it complete by the end of the year, and we'll be ready for 2026 if we get funding to put that in place. We also continue to invest in technology that improves our customers' experiences. For example, PACE continues to enhance the Transit app. I've been here before and I told you that we have an app called Transit, TRANSIT, if I can spell transit. With that app, you can put in from the beginning of your journey to the end of your journey how to get there. And it will be PACE, it will be Metro, it will be CTA. Why did PACE do this? Because we also now have our van pool services on there. We have our paratransit services on there. We have our on-demand services. So it ties our system together. So if you're getting off Metro and you want to get onto our on-demand system, it will tell you how to do that. So I urge you to download that on your phone, and it's a green app, and you can change it over to the PACE app. I always like people walking around with the PACE app. We've also introduced Trip Check, which is a mobile app for our paratransit riders. And what it will do, you'll be able to go on there and view your trip information, cancel trips. It will show you, much like on an Uber app, here's my bus, it's coming down the street, and I have to be ready to get on the paratransit vehicle. And we worked with Ventra to put faring, make it available to our riders on paratransit and on-demand services. So you can now use your Ventra app, your Ventra, not the app, but if you load money onto Ventra, when you schedule a ride on paratransit or on demand and you say you have a Ventra account, you can use your Ventra account to pay for your service. So those are some of the things that we're doing to tie technology into our service to make it easier for our customers. The 2025 Suburban Service Capital Program totals $78.8 million and is primarily for new buses and support facilities and reinforces our commitment to sustainability. Last year, I reported on our commitment to operate a fully zero-emission fleet by the year 2040. We continue to work with bus manufacturers to increase their production capacity, with ComEd to improve the capacity of the power grid, and to obtain sustainable funding for infrastructure upgrades to facilities. Securing funding will be the challenge in the years to come, but we're hoping that we're going to continue on and we will get the funding to continue on to get to zero emission by 2040. This year, we debuted our inaugural electric bus that is now in operation on 95th Street from the CTA 95th Street station all the way out to Palos Hills in Moraine Valley College. And we're preparing a second electric vehicle to be introduced yet this year. We also are making meaningful progress on electrification projects on our North Division Garage in Waukegan, River Division Garage in Elgin, and Southwest Division Garage in Bridgeview. We're excited to get these facilities going. Everybody here should be very happy. You have the newest facility that we put in place in 30 years in Plainfield. We're really pleased to have that garage there. It's not fully electric because when we envisioned this garage, it was right in the middle of COVID, and luckily we got it built very quickly before prices really expanded. That garage today, we spent about $50 million on that garage. If we built it now, it would probably be $150 million. So it was a very opportune moment to get it done. It does have the ability to have a couple of electric buses in, which is exciting because as part of our capital program, we're looking for an electric over-the-road coach to start demonstrating to see how it works on our I-55 service. You also will recall that PACE provides ADA services throughout Will County and the entire PACE service area. For 2025, the regional ADA paratransit budget is balanced to the RTA's funding level of $266 million. There are no fare increases planned for 2025. ADA paratransit ridership has already surpassed pre-pandemic levels by almost 8%. So far this year, PACE has provided more than 3.4 million ADA rides. In 2025, paratransit ridership is expected to grow again by 4.5%. We have seen continued growth in the use of our rideshare access program, which we call RAP. In this service, an ADA certified rider can choose to use a transportation network company such as Uber and Userve. Userve is a company that we brought to this area from the East Coast, and they're also doing the same type of service as Uber. So our ADA certified riders can choose to use Uber or UServe and not use the dedicated paratransit service. We have found that to be very good use of, first of all, the customers like it. Secondly, it gives the customers more freedom to just plan their trip on the go as opposed to calling a day in advance. And third, it's more cost effective and it saved the region a lot of money. We also introduced free rides for ADA paratransit riders on PACE fixed route bus service. We'll continue to do that in 2025. So to deliver these services, PACE continues to make considerable progress in recruiting operators and maintenance staff. We now offer CDL training classes in partnerships with many community colleges. In this area, we're partnering with Joliet Junior College. PACE covers the cost of tuition and other expenses associated with a CDL permit course. It's been very helpful to have this partnership with the community colleges. In addition, every Thursday, we have a hire on the spot event at 2 locations, one in Arlington Heights at our corporate headquarters, the second one in Markham at our new South Campus. So every Thursday, you can come in at 9:30 or 1:30, and we will go over your background, we'll interview you, you'll take a test for becoming a bus operator, you'll be brought into the maintenance group so we can get you tested also for that. That won't be the same day, but that happens every Thursday. So if you know people looking for jobs, we have jobs available. And again, if you can tell your constituents, we'll be happy to give you information to put into your newsletter to get that done. So in closing, even as PACE's 2025 budget is balanced, the regional transit system is facing a projected operating shortfall of more than $730 million annually, starting in 2026. PACE has shown incredible creativity and flexibility in attempting to serve as many people as possible with the resources we have available to us. With additional funding, PACE could do so much more, and we want to do so much more. However, our ability to innovate and provide critical mobility for communities cannot happen without investment in public transportation. Public transportation is an essential role in the lives of millions of riders across the region, but the system has been drastically underfunded for decades. We continue to advocate for adequate funding that will not only allow us to maintain our current system, but also build a modern, resilient transit network for generations to come. With that, I want to thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Are there any questions from any of the members of the board? Judy?
Yeah, you mentioned are you using Uber and UServe? How do you spell UServe? Is it the word UServe? I don't know.
It's UZURE, something like that. I have to double check. But
UZURE,
Yeah.
okay, like Azure or something. Okay, I was wondering about that. It sounds really interesting. I think that, my father-in-law, when he was here, he used the PACE bus he had surgery and we worked all day, so they picked him up and took him. So that was a great service. So I think it's good though if we use a smaller service than a bus, because you could then help do a better job, I think, at getting to the people no matter where they live, because we lived in the country, so there's no reason for a bus out our way. But we did use that service, and it was very beneficial to all of us. In addition to that, I was wondering if I can ask, do you guys have any idea where the legislation is going with trying to change the way the whole, CTA, RTA, everything is working out?
Yeah, I think there's been ongoing discussions both in the Senate and the House, and they've created some working group committees, and they continue to do that. There's 2 options that were floated out there. One is a consolidation into a bigger agency, one agency that would control everything. And then there's also another option that's out there that basically enhances the RTA's powers and has them take on things that PACE and Metra and CTA are currently doing. So, our biggest concern, I think, is, with any major consolidation, is the loss of us being able to be creative and adapt quickly, which currently we do. And we do a lot of pilot programs where, you guys come up with a suggestion, we figure out, okay, we've got some money in the budget, let's go ahead and try it. I don't know how that works in a bigger scenario where there's a bigger agency there might be a level of bureaucracy that it might go to. So that's kind of our concern. We all need the funding, and I think that's something that it sounds like everyone is supportive of. It's just a matter of where the revenue comes from. But I think the consolidation aspect of it is, I think everybody kind of needs to like weigh in on that, because we're not sure what that other structure would look like,
Do you know what those bills are? Or they aren't been introduced this year yet?
There are some bills, but I'm sure they're going to change. We can definitely get them to you. But there's two working groups, one in the Senate and one in the committee. And again, we can get those to your legislative committee.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judy. And I, just so everyone knows, I have not had official training on this system. I wanted to leave everybody's microphone hot, and then we can just go in order, but there was a time where there was some reverb or whatever. So I did turn some microphones off, but we'll manage. And I did write down the order of people that did want to ask questions. So we'll fight through this. I got Jackie next. Good morning, Jackie. And go ahead.
My question actually had to do with Userve and the Uber, and I gave it to Beth, so I think I've got it handled. But I will give you an observation from my ride last night to Lincolnshire, where I was privileged to watch a fantastic Elvis impersonator. There hasn't been a year in my life that I have traveled on 294 that it hasn't been under construction. I'm 62. I don't know what it's going to take to get our country to focus on public transportation as they did in Europe many years ago. It is sorely needed. And I think that that's part of the reason you don't see as quick of an uptick in things, is because it doesn't go everywhere you need to go, or even close. We have a food pantry here in Will County and DuPage Township in Romeoville. There is no public transportation to our food pantry. Those are the people that need transportation, and there's just no way to get there. So I wish you luck. I hope the money tree rains on you heavily. But yeah, I don't see an answer in the future, honestly.
All right, Mark Revis. Okay. Dawn Bullock, good morning.
So your app, I went in for a transit app. There's lots of choices. Can you give me a little more what I'm looking for?
Okay, you're on the app, sorry. If you get on the transit app, you
No,
can,
wait, I'm not on the transit app because there's a lot of choices.
okay, it's green, I'm
It's
sorry.
all green. So the
It's-
transit, subway and bus.
And
but
it should
this-
be green with little white stripes going down, vertical,
Just stripes,
Yeah.
not a curve,
from my memory.
correct?
I can, you know what, after this meeting,
Okay.
I can show it to you on there.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll make sure
Thanks.
you're on the right app.
Yes.
Thanks.
Perfect. All right, Julie Berkowitz, good morning. Go ahead and just turn it on.
I-
Yeah.
I
Jennifer
forgot
did
to
it
hit the button.
differently. I was trying to make
Thank
it less
you.
confusing.
So Friday evening, my husband and I went to the city, and I lived in the city 15 years plus, took the L, took the buses. That was my life. What I was really stunned, though, that the L along the expressway, and also the CTA buses overall were very empty. The ridership seemed to be primarily groups of college students, you could tell because they were wearing their sweatshirts, and then, a few other commuters. But it was very different from my life when I lived in the city. And this was throughout the whole day, which was really kind of shocking, but that just indicates how, patterns have changed. But it also indicated to me that I think within that urban area, this new generation it's not cool to go hang out on the L and, right? They've got other methods. So that just brings me to where what I saw was they're so distinctly different from us. And like you said, Melinda, we've got to be creative out here. We're a different environment. So I have a lot of concerns about that legislation because it's not a one size fits all model. And, you know, the strain for us to try to implement and change the system in a rural environment, at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit us out here. So on the county board, we appreciate you keeping us up to date with how that legislation is moving forward, how it could impact us so we can be proactive. But I was shocked at the change when, you know, being in the city again after a long time, especially through COVID, I think there's a distinct change. We're coming a long way out here, but I was really shocked to see that.
I think some of your comments are really accurate. There has been a shift. More people are moving out to the suburbs, and so we need to make sure that we get the funding that we need to operate our services. Will County has been very supportive of PACE and the transit systems in general, and stating that the systems should remain separate so that we can address the needs out in the suburbs and in rural areas. We're not only urban, we also have suburban and rural areas. The CTA is urban. So we need to keep, I think my big suggestion to all of you is please keep in touch with your legislators and tell them how important it is that the suburbs have a voice. And if we combine everything together, the suburban voice may be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Micah Freeman, good morning.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. I know that, and Julie made me think about it. It's a lot of people use the transit system, who use a transit system. They don't have a 9 to 5 job. Sometimes they are working until like 8 or 9, sometimes even 10. Have you expanded the hours to make it possible for them to actually get home?
That's something that we are doing now. I agree with you, and I agree with you, especially in our suburban systems. We end too early, and we're looking at gearing that up. We've been doing it all year. We've been gearing later hours. We're continuing to do that. We're also continuing to put in more weekend service because that's where we see our ridership shift. It's no longer the 9 to 5. It's shifting to weekends and later hours. So that's something that we are doing and we're going to continue to do. And again, I urge everyone to get to our revision program, and put in your comments because that is going to reshape our system of the future. But we are looking at that and we're also doing it.
And the other question I had was, I live in Plainfield and we do have a beautiful terminal. I don't know what the exact word is supposed to be. However, it's out away from everywhere. So if you don't have a car to get there, it's hard to get on the bus. Are we looking at ways to help the people who don't have a car to get to a location?
Absolutely. That's some of our newer services, like our on-demand service, where we put it in. It will get people to other transit options. That terminal you're talking about was built as a big park and ride lot, so people could park their cars and get on our express service going downtown. But we are looking at different ways through our rideshare partnerships with Uber and UServe, through our on-demand services, through our van pool program, and especially we have a van pool program we can adapt to anywhere. It's called Van Go, where if there is a need, we will put a van at, for example, we have them at CTA stations and at Metra stations. So when you get off CTA or Metra, you can have one of our vans there. You can take that van to go to work, come back, park the vehicle, get back on your train, and we take care of the vehicle. We can adapt that to other areas and other programs. So we have a lot of ways of running our business. Our van pool program is a great example of that.
That's quite innovative.
Thank you.
The other question, I had only two, but you made me think of another one. How are you letting the seniors and those with disabilities know that you have these services? Are you sending out letters? Is it in the,
Many different ways, but one thing is if you're ADA certified, for example, we will send out postcards to everyone who is certified. So we know those people and we can send out information to them. For others who seniors who may not be ADA certified, we do advertising. We're happy to work with you, do some advertising in your local newsletters that you have. And the townships and the community newsletters. The other thing is, the chairman has stated earlier, is we're putting another $200,000 into the Will County on-demand services. So part of that money could be used for advertising, and we're happy to work with you on that.
yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, we have our website, we could put something out there that says we offer these for services.
And we'll be happy to help you formulate that message. And also, if you can put in our revision program, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Kelly Hickey, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Kelly Hickey. I was recently a township trustee and I worked with the PACE program there. We were with Ride DuPage, so it was a little bit different. So please correct me if I have any of these things wrong. But when I was involved with the program, there seemed to be a really hard time in keeping drivers. There was a lot of turnover. There was a lot of problems attracting enough drivers to keep the routes going. I know that I believe it was 69 bus routes in the southwest suburbs were cut, or maybe that was Chicago-wide following COVID because of lack of ridership. But there's a part of our population that is always in need of rides, and it's our elderly and people with disabilities. I myself have an emerging driver who drives to Lansing, Illinois every day from Naperville. It's incredible what the difference reliable transportation can make on someone's life, if they can be independent or not. So I guess my questions are, when the Uber program rolled out as a supplement, that was not able to address the issues with people who had mobility issues, specifically if they had any kind of mobility aid, because obviously it was harder to figure out how things were going to work with Uber. But that piece and then the geofencing were two issues that we kept running up against. Have there been any changes in either of those issues?
First of all, with regard to drivers, that has been a major focus for PACE. And as I said, we're hiring every Thursday. We're training. By the way, what I didn't mention is we just developed a brand new training center for PACE employees that we used to have to train people on the street. That was the only way we could do them. We now have a track where we can take drivers on and we can train them. We have a big facility where we can really do a good job training. We've always done a great job, but we can do a little bit better because we can do it on our own property as opposed to on the public streets. So we are gaining on the driver situation, and put in your newsletters, we are hiring. We're happy to get people in. We do all the training. You don't have to even have a driver's license. We can train you to drive a bus. Actually, the less you know, the better for us. We train you the right way, and there we go. So we are always hiring, and we're moving ahead. During COVID, we did lose a ton of drivers. It was the great, hey, I'm resigning, I'm done, I'm not going to go to work anymore. We're starting to gain back. We still need a lot more drivers. With regard to Uber and UServe, the geofencing is around the ADA service area. For those of you who don't know, and doesn't make a ton of sense, not everyone needs to know this except we need to know it, and it affects the people who ride. ADA paratransit service is provided where there is a fixed route. So if we put more fixed routes out there, there's more ADA service. That's why our revision program is so important to not only our fixed route system, but to the ADA system. Ride DuPage, Will Ride or Will Access, all of those go beyond the ADA service area. And one of the things, that Will County can do, they can use the money to use Uber and UServe to ride the system. With regards to mobility aids, two things that happen. One is as people choose to use Uber or UServe, it provides more capacity on our fixed route, on our, I'm sorry, paratransit system. So so someone who is in a wheelchair or has a mobility device has more options because there's more openings on the system. Two is that Uber and YouServe are required to meet the federal requirements. So they do have vehicles that are accessible to people with mobility devices. So you should continue to push that if you know someone who wants to use that service.
One more question. With regard to the hours, a lot of the people that are using it in my township are dealing with set appointments like dialysis, and those can be anywhere from 4:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night. And I know that there was some concern, especially if they did need the lift or anything on their bus to be able to get home. Are those able to be accommodated, or does it take time, or how can we address that?
The other part of the ADA rules, I said it has to be along a fixed route within 3/4 of a mile fixed route. It has to be the same days and the same hours. So if the bus route ends at 7, the ADA service also ends at 7. So what we need to do is, again, expand our fixed route service. Once we expand the hours on that, it will expand it also to the ADA portion. But so that's another way that it's important to expand our service hours.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
All right. Any other questions from the board members? I see none. Well, I'd like to thank you, Rick and Melinda, for coming in. It was a fantastic presentation, a lot of information, and I believe the board presented a lot of great questions, and you guys provided great answers. So thank you so much for coming in, and maybe we'll see you next year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Executive. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Number 2 on our new business presentation is from Metra, their annual budget presentation. I'd like to introduce Don Arcino and his fellow gentlemen. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. Good morning, Speaker Van Dyne and members of the board, and also Executive Barantino. We really appreciate you inviting us out here so we can explain what the budget is. And with me today, I have Jim Derwinski, who is our CEO, and John Morris, who is our CFO. So together, we should be able to answer any questions you may have and anything of that such. I just want to point out, as you can see the sign, we're 40 years young this year. And it seems like things go full circle. 40 years ago, the agency was formed because all of the railroads were getting rid of passenger service. They didn't want passenger service to Rock Island, to BN, Chicago Northwestern. Nobody wanted it. So the RTA was formed and created the 3 service boards. Unfortunately, 40 years later, we've done wonderful things. We've rebuilt railroads, we've upgraded our bus systems and everything else. However, we're back into the catch-22 of funding. I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, I want to talk about COVID happened, and it really decimated the transportation industry, along with many other industries. As you can remember, you couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't do anything, you couldn't find workers. Things were very, very topsy-turvy. That caused a big problem for us because our ridership virtually fell to nothing at that time, and we're slowly trying to get our ridership back. We're doing everything we can to do it. I'm going to give you some little highlights of where we're at today. System-wide, we're 71% back to where we were pre-COVID. That sounds great, but there's a lot of lines that aren't. Our Metro Electric line is at 61%. Our Rock Island is at 55%. Our Southwest Service is at 60%. Heritage, that's 46%. BNSF is 64%. UP West Line is 87%. They're doing very well. Milwaukee District West Line is at 59%. Our UP Northwest Line is 77%. Our Milwaukee North Line is at 67%. And then our North Central Service is at 55 and our UP North line is at 104%. Now, there's some anomalies there because we've got the construction going up on the Kennedy. So a lot of those people, we're trying to get them to use the train. That, believe it or not, that's a good thing for us because once the people realize they can get on a train and not have to worry, as many of you have mentioned, about driving and everything else, they can just get on the train, they can read their book, they can do whatever they got to do, go to work and then come home. So those are some good things. We've done some refinement on our service levels. As I said, some of these lines are exceeding the capacity, so we've added things to that. On our Rock Island line, which affects mostly in Will County here, we're back to 100% of our pre-COVID service, and we've increased the, we made some of the schedules better so our commuters can go on the train and have less travel time. One of the things I do want to talk about is inflationary costs. We all know things cost more today than they did 3 or 4 years ago. Some of those costs have subsided. I'm not saying they've gone back to where they were because some of them will never go back. The most volatile thing we have is fuel because that goes up and down, as you can see when you go to the gas station. That just happens. But when it comes to buying materials and things like that and paying for transportation, that's not going to go down. That's what it is. So those are some of the contentions that we have to deal with. The other thing we are dealing with right now is, I don't know, I think we presented this last year where the UP a couple of years ago came to us and said they don't want to provide service anymore. So we said, you have to provide service. We got into a big court thing. And believe it or not, they said they didn't have to, the court said they didn't have to provide service. So right now we're working with the UP through litigation and everything else to try to, how are we going to take over that service? Talking about buying stations, buying access to right-of-way, doing all the different things, all the mechanical employees, operating employees, engineering employees, with all the other unions that are involved with that. Just at Metro alone, we've got 17 crafts that are represented by 14 unions. So it's not an easy task to do that. But we're working very hard to get that done so we don't have, so we can complete the service for all the people that are on the UP lines. New regulations and technologies have increased our operating costs. I think I said here a while back, when we came out with PTC, it's a wonderful thing, positive train control to avoid collisions. That cost Metro $435 million unfunded mandate. And by the way, that's just one thing. It's like anything else. It's costing us probably about 25 million a year to keep that system up and running. That comes right out of the operating dollars that we have. Sales tax projections, I'm going to talk about some good things now. Sales tax projections look pretty good for us, so that's helping us out. And also the projected amount is about $330 million for the federal funding relief, which will carry us well into 2025. So those are some good things, but we do have a budget hole, as we talked about, of about $32 million that we've got to fix. And I don't want anyone to think, this is my opinion, that a major consolidation and everything is going to fix that problem. The problem is funding. We can do so much more if we had the proper funding, and that's really the key. You asked about, well, what are we going to do to fix the transportation system? We've got to address it. We've got to put money in the transportation system to fix it. And then we can have the systems, all of our systems, that really are what the people are looking for. In saying that, I'm going to turn it over to John Morris, our CFO. He can talk about the actual budget. John?
Thank you, Director Orsino, members of the board, guests. Good morning. I'm going to talk about the operating budget for 2025 and then our projections for 2026 and 27. So what you're looking at here, I'll orient you, and I'm not going to read everything. It's kind of an eye chart. The first column that you see that says 2024 est, that is our estimate for what we think the actual financials for 2024 are going to be. The column to the right in the middle is the budget. That was what we proposed last year. And then the last column is our budget for 2025. So I'm not going to read everything, but cover some key highlights. And the first is the number right under the columns where you see under 2025 You see a 36.5 compared to 40 under 2024B. So that's the number, millions of rides that we were looking to give. So we estimated that we would give 40 million rides, and we're actually looking to give 36.5. And what that means is in 2023, when we put this together, we were trying to estimate how much of an increase in ridership we would get year over year. I think they showed a slide that showed the growth of ridership. We're well below the pre-pandemic ridership, but it is growing. So we were trying to estimate how much that growth is more in 2024 compared to 23, excuse me. And we kind of overestimated a little bit because companies were saying, hey, we're going to return to office, and employees push back, and we didn't have as much of that. And also the patterns of how people are riding. When Director Orsino says we're at 61, 71% of pre-pandemic, that are on key days. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the train might be crowded. Come in on Monday, come in on Friday, plenty of seats. You can have a party in the car. So we don't have that full ridership across 5 days. And what that means is fewer riders, which drives fewer passenger fare revenues. So we thought we'd get 190 million in fare revenue. We're only going to get about 172 million. Okay. So our total revenues, we're going to be a little bit lower than the budget, but we've looked to increase that a little bit to go to 39 million rides in 2025. So it's an increase, but we're not growing as fast as we thought. And that would generate about $304 million, which is a significant increase to what we estimate for 2024. But on the flip side, the operating expenses are going to go up. There are two pieces to the operating expense. And the first line is what you really should pay attention to, because that's our regular railroad operating expense that we look to see that we're going to go from about 965 million this year to $1.07 billion next year. And excuse me, as Director Orsino alluded to, we've got a number of things pushing expenses up. Inflation that everyone feels. We've lowered the assumption compared to previous budget estimates, but we are going to see an increase in everything: salaries, materials, fuel, and everything at the rate of inflation. Then on top of that, we have to add in expenses for regulations and mandates. And then we're also trying to look for ways to enhance things in the railroad in terms of our workforce and how we apply to customer service. So that's necessitated an increase in our operating expenses. Now, what that means is we're going to have a deficit because the operating expenses are significantly greater than our operating revenue. And you see that we'll have about $831 million deficit. Our main way of filling that out has been sales taxes. Director Orsino said sales tax has been growing over the last few years pretty consistently. So we're estimating we'll get nearly $600 million, 593 in sales taxes in 2025. But that still isn't enough. As you see, we're going to have about $238 million hole. Now, what helps us is the federal government provided us with COVID relief funds, and we've been very careful in how we've been using the funds. We thought initially they might run out in 2024, and we've been able to carefully husband those funds so that they're going to last into 2026, which you'll see on the next slide. So we look to end the year with a balanced budget thanks to the COVID relief and still have about $331 million at $93 million. I'm sorry, 333 at the beginning of the year, end with $93 million. Okay. So if we hit the next slide and look at how this translates across the future. And again, we have the estimate for this year as the first column, the budget, which I just showed you for 2025, and then projections for 2026 and 2027. So we're carrying forward $93 million into 2026. And again, we're looking at increased ridership, another 2 million riders, and that's going to drive increased passenger revenue. But it's also, we're going to see increases again from inflation primarily in operating expenses. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a hole of about $254 million. Will only this year, the 2026, have $93 million in funding. Plus, you'll see a new thing in there that's in red, which is called Bear Box Capital. And that's a new thing that we'll have to institute. And what that means is we're going to have to start refunding our funds out of operations to be able to do local match for projects such as rebuilding bridges, buying rolling stock, fixing stations, and things like that. So that's an additional increase of funding we need. So what that means is we use up the 93 million and we're at $220 million shortfall in 2026. This is what they mean by fiscal cliff. Where's that money come from? When we go to 2027, there is no federal funding. So while ridership goes up, expenses also go up, and that hole gets bigger, and there's no federal funding to help fill it. So it's a $332 million hole. Now, after that, not so good news, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Jim Dorensky.
All right, thank you very much, John, and pleasure to be here today. Thanks for having Metro out to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing and plan on doing. John gave you the financials and the red line that he showed there. That's kind of an important piece coming up. So this chart here is our capital program for 5 years. The green is what we were able to fund. The blue is what we weren't able to fund. The total, it was 5 billion. We were able to fund just around 2 billion. So the red is what we weren't able to fund. It's 3 billion. So when I throw these giant numbers around, what it means is 60% of our projects, 60% of the dollars we wanted to actually do something, we actually had to say no. You're not going to replace that 1953 car. You're not going to replace that 1977 locomotive. And oh yeah, by the way, there's other things that are going to have to get put on the back burner. And that's been our history for a long time. As Director Orsino pointed out, it's never been funded correctly over the 40 years. If I have the next slide up there. This is just the highlights of our capital program. And the sources where they come from. At the end of the day, 2.2 billion. You might sit back and say, oh my gosh, 2.2 billion over the next 5 years. That's awesome. That's the most Metro's ever gotten. We have a $13 billion backlog. At this pace, we'll never, ever catch up. So if I can go to the next slide, it'll just highlight the categories. See 46% is going rolling stock. I mentioned some old equipment that we have. We have legacy equipment. It was here before Metro was formed. Bridges, tracks, and structures is something we're really starting to focus in on, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The rest of those components on the slide, really they're the core workings of what we need to do to just keep the railroad running. We have to replace ties, to replace tracks, signal systems. We're out PTC, that $435 million system, that already needs an upgrade. It's been out there running long enough that those components are already wearing out. We have to look at a full service upgrade to the back office very soon. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just highlight some of the more fun things, as John points out. So on the locomotives there on the far left for Metra, those are new. You might see them running around on the Milwaukee division right now if you're out there. Those are what's called an SD70. We converted these freight locomotives to passenger service. They are running exceptional. They're our cleanest running locomotive by emission standards. They're also looking to be one of our most fuel efficient locomotives, and they're AC traction, and that's a big deal for us. That's a more reliable form of traction. So great purchase. Those are 2,000. So we purchased 2,000 locomotives to improve our fleet. Not 2,000 of them, 15 of them from the year 2000. So that's kind of how we've been having to manage to try to make sure that we're improving and we're not selectively finding where some of that the funds can go. In the middle, that's a rolling stock procurement. We've got 400 cars of our 800 push-pull cars that are older than 1980. 53 is the oldest, 1953. Those cars are coming. They're made by Alstom in New York. We've got 200 on order right now, so it'll take a good dent out of the fleet once they start getting delivered and tested. Looking forward to actually getting those out on the diesel lines. And on the far right there, you see this fancy European looking bizarre train. That's actually all battery. So we contracted out with Stadler USA. They're going to be built in Salt Lake City by America, and they're going to be the first battery powered zero emissions train set in the country that'll be in operation for passenger service. There is a hydrogen train set that's out there now, but this will be the first one with batteries. We've purchased 8 of them right now on a base order, and that was only thanks to a $156 million CMAQ grant. And when these get built, our whole goal is to get them up here and test them out in what a cold winter looks like and a hot summer looks like, and see what the battery capacities have in them. We are going to start running these on the Rock Island line initially. We'll have to build certain infrastructure for charging, but they'll start going through the Rock Island, and then eventually, depending on how they are used, they have a far less capacity. In the center of the train is actually the power unit, and then they have cars on the end of the train. So like a 2-car train set's about 120. You put 4 cars in there, it's about 240. So for certain times of the day, certain runs of the day, that's perfect. Why drag a 9-car diesel train around with all the emissions, the vibration, and the noise? These things we really are hopeful that are going to be kind of the wave of the future, and eventually that technology could be used in the bigger locomotives on the long hauls. Ideally, down the road, I'd love to run these things to and from Central Business District to O'Hare on an express service. Next slide. So bridges, we have 926 bridges we operate over every single day. Of those, Metro owns 446. We've identified through some very critical work, 210 of those bridges need to be replaced. So we can start replacing those bridges and decimate the capital program completely down to only bridges, but that's not the best solution. So what we've actually done is put together a program, and we've been out marching Capitol Hill, talking to Springfield, building up coalitions to try to find a funding source so that we can actually start attacking some of these bridges. The vast majority of the bridges in the red circle are from the 1800s. A good chunk of the bridges in the middle circle are from the 1800s. So if I go to the next slide, this is the proposed program, about $140 million a year for the next 20 years. Starts really whittling away at it. If we really could get some money in here, about $280 million a year. Over the next 20 years, we can really take a good chunk out of that. So again, with the elected officials down in Springfield, we've been starting to have these conversations. This is what we get when you inherit a legacy system. The bridges were designed at a 75-year service life back in 1880. So that means those legacy railroads that were shedding their passenger service, this was not their core concern at the time. These bridges are safe. We have to inspect them federally. These bridges have to really start getting improved. A lot of times I'll be able to show a picture of a bridge, old bridge, and then what a new bridge looks like. The center pilings all get to leave because of the way they build the bridges nowadays. And I often point out to people that those bridges were installed before automobiles were invented. And so what ends up happening is you open up that roadway, you open up the walkway, the bike path, and we no longer get hit by trucks. You know, once in a while, the trucks hit the bridge. We have to stop train traffic, have to inspect the bridge. So it is a critical component, not just because they're really old and they need to get fixed, but it also is going to eventually help what's below the bridge and above the bridge. So with that, I think I've done just kind of highlighting a lot of our capital program, but I look forward to any questions you would have.
Any questions, board members? I see Jackie Trenier. Good morning again.
Good morning. Not so much a question that you could answer, but I would really be interested to know, and if this information is out there somewhere and somebody in this room knows about it, I'd like to know the total amount spent on roads in any given year, and then the amount of money spent on public transportation during that same year. I'd just be curious. I mean, these numbers you talk about, they are astronomical. Most people can't identify with them. But it just seems to me it would be really interesting. And then maybe to go along with that, the number of people that are served on each. But yeah, it costs a lot to get around, the invention of the engine, I guess you'd say. But
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to Julie and then Herb, you'll be up next. Julie?
Thank you, Joe. So the budget and all the numbers that you gave us, I'm assuming it's all for equipment and assets within Illinois? Is it all within, okay.
Yes.
All right. And the reason why I asked that is because, so our Boy Scout troop, several times we've hopped on the Metra at the Naperville station, gone all the way to Rantoul, New Mexico. From there, gone to Philmont, the Scout Ranch, for a high adventure trek. That is an experience that we still talk about it. We really enjoyed it. We'd get on the train with, 20 plus youth and go all the way to New Mexico. But one of the things we learned when we did that was that basically that service, our service, and our ability to transfer our troops to New Mexico was essentially keeping Rantoul alive. And this one year, they were literally on the verge, the whole town, of disappearing. The only thing keeping them alive were the crews that were coming in to go to Philmont. It was an incredible experience, and we were able to spend a lot of time talking to people in the transportation area. And I bring that up because what I'm interested in is what is the collaboration with the other states and the other governments who are technically, they're thriving and they're also getting a benefit from our services here. Are we able to collaborate with them? And I know it's incredibly complicated, but it's more than just us. And when we thrive, we really help the region around us as well.
And so our actual service region, the train you rode is an Amtrak train. That's the National Railway Network. They operate on our tracks. We operate on their tracks. They own Union Station. Amtrak's really three big elements. They run the Northeast Corridor. They run what's called state-supported service. So in the state of Illinois, they'll run Springfield. They'll run down to St. Louis, Champaign. And they then also run what's called long-distance service. So you were on a train, I believe, called a Super Chief. And that's the Amtrak service. But to that end, the one big thing that you bring up is the collaboration. So Amtrak, because it is in, I think, 28 states, we actually partner with Amtrak on many grant applications because there's a dual benefit. Freights also partner with Amtrak and we partner with the freights because there's dual benefit. The National Railway Network is limited. We're not going to be able to knock buildings down and add more tracks. So we have to always find the partnerships with inside other entities of government so that we can benefit the region we serve. Our only entity that actually leaves the state of Illinois right now is Kenosha. So there's a legacy component of the UP North Line that goes into Kenosha, Wisconsin. They do not provide any taxes for that. It's just a legacy component that we still service.
That's interesting. To that end, that's an incredible experience for the people here and also for the people at the other end of the destination. I do know that we often talk about going to other parts of the Midwest, and I don't know if you can partner with Amtrak and some of the other routes, maybe for areas in Michigan like Wine Country, Traverse City, but maybe create destination routes.
Yeah, so we actually were selected by IDOT last year to run the new Rockford service. So it'll be the first time we leave the 6-county region. The 6 counties provide the tax base for Metro CTA, PACE, and RTA. So we're going to have to firewall off all those taxpayer dollars inside the region that we provide service. And then the service we'll provide outside the region will actually be reimbursed and funded by IDOT. Currently, there's talk of many other routes in the state of Illinois, and they call that the Illinois State Rail Program, Passenger Rail Program. They want to expand that into other areas. And then I actually happen to chair what's called the Illinois High-Speed Rail Commission, where we by statute are required to put a plan together from St. Louis to Chicago with feeder routes. And those feeder routes eventually could come from Indianapolis, Detroit, other areas of the country. But it's kind of a fun project because there's no money for this, but it's the idea of kind of you'll build it the right way, like we didn't do right after World War II when Europe and Asia invested in public transportation like we didn't. We invested in roadways. So it's a good project to be part of, to actually have a plan on the shelf if somebody could get the funds for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Herb Brooks, good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My question is more of a concern, and that is with bridges that were built in the 1800s. I was driving Southern Illinois several years ago, went across a small bridge that had a sign, "Cross at your own risk." I turned around, went back to Joliet. But your bridges that were built in the 1800s, I know you don't have such signs. However, I'm just concerned about the safety, the inspection, and bridges that old. You just got to wonder about them.
Yeah, the good news is we do inspect them all the time. They are safe. If something happens, the first thing that happens on a bridge is you put slow orders in. It can't handle the load over it, the speed. A lot of those bridges, when they were built for steam engines. And those big steam engines weighed a lot more than the equipment used today. And that's probably why we're seeing such a great service life out of these bridges. But that slide I showed, absolutely, we're making it front and center.
Okay.
This is something we are going to have to start working on. We're about to start what's called a PE and the NEPA preliminary engineering and NEPA for 10 bridges, and we're going to do 10 a year every year. The big key in all this is finding construction money.
Okay.
So that's like maybe 85% of every single bridge project. So we've got a lot of work to do. They are safe. We have no signs that say go over at your own risk. We have no signs that say go under at your own risk. Our bridges are all safe. And the freight railroads that we operate on obviously operate in that same way. A lot of those bridges that we operate over every day, we don't own. So we're about to replace 22 bridges on the UP North Line. Those are going to be a combination of federal dollars and Illinois dollars, and that's a railroad that's not owned by the taxpayers of Illinois. But those bridges need to be replaced.
Okay. Thank you. I feel better. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Metra? Well done, gentlemen, and thank you again for your presentation and making the board and the county aware of some of the deficiencies in the funding, and hopefully we can get some of that fixed. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, the RTA annual budget presentation. Mr. J.D. Ross and folks, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and members of the board.
Good morning.
I have with me today Kevin Blaso, our Chief Financial Officer, and Rob Nash, who is our Chief Governmental Affairs Officer. And they'll be happy, actually, Kevin's going to do the presentation, and Rob and I will be happy to try to answer some questions. I had some prepared remarks, which are pretty much a summary of things you've already heard, so I'm going to dispense with those and just make a couple of comments about governance. The mere suggestion that there be an overhaul and the creation of a new entity suggests that there was something wrong with the way the system works, and that's what created the financial issues that we have in this 6-county area. My response to that would be to say that's totally inaccurate. We have had for years one of the most efficient systems in the country when you look at operating costs or any other measure of efficiency. We have been near the top. Secondly, if governance was the issue with respect to our financial issue, then why is every other system in the country facing similar concerns that we have here in in this area. So I would just urge us, especially as residents of Will County, to be very careful about any new structure out there that has the potential effect to minimize the input that we get to have to the regional system. One of the things that protects us right now is that on the RTA board, we have a requirement for a supermajority vote. And with 16 members of the board, we have to have 12 positive votes for any significant piece of governance that comes before us. That allows each of the three areas, and I call them three, meaning the 5 collar counties, the 5 suburban Cook counties, and the 5 city reps. That allows any group to, in a sense, protect its territory, but it also, more importantly, forces consensus within the region. And so any change, and right now we don't know what those changes are going to be. There's some legislation, a lot of discussion floating around out there. But what the final picture looks like, we don't know. But I would simply say that anything that takes away the balance where Will County and the other suburban counties have equal input into what happens with respect to transportation in this region should be viewed as a problem for Will County. Enough of my soapbox. With that, let me introduce Kevin Blaisdell, our Chief Financial Officer, who's going to present our budget. I mentioned last year, and some of you know, that Kevin has a lot of county government experience, as he was the Chief Financial Officer for McHenry County before he came to the RTA. Kevin?
Well, thank you for the introduction, and Director Ross, and for your leadership representing Will County at the RTA board. Thank you, Speaker Van Dyke and County Executive Jennifer, and County Board as well. Today we're going to adjust some of the written remarks that I got, just because the service boards already presented some of their highlights. So if we can, this slide here just represents that, as a geographical area, we're 1/10 of the percentage of the state. When we represent also 74% of the economic engine. In order for us to deliver that economic impact, we have to have a robust transit network, which is what we have. Obviously, as we have talked about, these requires significant critical funding for us, and so that's going to be sort of the theme of my presentation as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Just before I get into the numbers, we are seeing very positive news in terms of ridership. It's seen a 14% increase from July of 2023. We're still not close to pre-pandemic levels, and so the budgets that we're presenting here as the RTA, we're basically rolling those numbers up that PACE, CTA, and Metra have, and then our own portion of it as well. But the ridership at this point, we're budgeting at about 78% of pre-pandemic levels, even though, again, the level of service that we are prepared to deliver is 100% of what we're estimating. However, at the pre-pandemic levels, we're still not hitting those numbers yet. Next slide, please. The operating regional budget 2025 is projected to have expenses of about $4.2 billion. These represent a 5.7% increase compared to the 2024 levels. So again, as I mentioned, 78%. The collective pre-pandemic level of ridership, it's about 78%. And as mentioned by CTA and PACE, Metra and PACE, there's no fare increases, and it's the same for CTA as well. So across the region, that's included in our 2025 proposed budget. Next slide, please. On this slide, the one area that I want to highlight is there's two areas. One is the system continues to rely on sales tax, and we presented that we are seeing some good news, positive news in terms of the RTA sales tax. However, that number is plateauing, so we're seeing that number to level off at this point. We were seeing, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we were seeing increases of anywhere between 4 and 6% year over year. We're seeing that number get to 3%, 2%, and that's where we will believe that that number is going to stay over the next few years. So that means we can't really count on the RTA sales tax increase to continue to extend how long we're going to be able to use the COVID relief funding in the system. And then the other point I wanted to make on this one is the percentage. So what you see on the dark brown, 19.5%, that is the amount that is being, the gap that is being filled through the COVID relief funding as a region. So we have been talking over $730 million of fiscal cliff. That number came out in 2021, 2022. As we know, a lot of things have changed since then, inflation being one of them. So that number has exponentially grown. And we continue to communicate that this represents 20% of our regional budget. So that number continues to grow as we continue to see the increases in a lot of the different expense levels that we see. If we can move on to the next slide. So on the expense side, again, we see CTA makes up the most of the expense levels. Obviously, they also provide the most services in their area as well. Then we see Metra PACE taking the 27%, 8.2% respectively. RTA, our own RTA agency budget represents about 1.4% of the budget for 2025. And that, again, that it's a very small portion to do the oversight and capital planning that we do on our side. Next slide, please. On the capital side, so if you were to compare this year's capital program to 2024, you would see that there will be a $3.5 billion increase over the next 5 years. And most of that $3.5 billion is related to the red line extension for CTA. So that's the only sort of highlight and change that you see here. But over the next 5 years, the system is expected to invest about $9.5 billion. And this is a requirement for us to present this information. Again, I know one of the board members mentioned these numbers are hard to relate to because they're astronomical. But obviously, that's also the impact that it has on the region. Next slide, please. On this slide, I just want to highlight some of these projects. We, PACE and Metra already talked about them, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but some of the things that are being done here in Will County specifically. Next slide, please. In February of 2023, the RTA board approved the Our Transit is the Answer strategic plan, and that has guided all of our work at the RTA. Over the last year, there's been a few programs that I like to highlight. One of them is the Access Pilot Program, and that is a partnership with Cook County and the RTA and Metra. And we would love, so far we have had 5,000 people enroll in that program. So this is for people who are eligible for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So 5,000 people have already benefited from this program. We would love to have the funding to expand it to CTA and PACE as well. We also conducted a fair equity report, and this looks at all the different programs that we have in the system. And then the last thing I'll highlight on this side is that we are working on a daily pass, if you will, with all the agencies, and that's again to include all the fair policies that we have, all our fair products that we have into one. That's still in the works, and we're hoping that we can deliver that over the next few months. It'll take a bit of time due to the technology to catch up on that, but we're getting there. Next slide, please. As highlighted by the service boards, 2026 is going to be a pivotal time for us. There's going to be 2 routes that we're hoping that we go into the expanding the system instead of going down to the fiscal cliff. And on the next slide, we'll show, if you can move on to the next slide, we'll show kind of what that means. So if we fall off the cliff, then we have to change gears, right? So we're going to have to go into, instead of improving the system, we're going to have to go down the path of which routes we're going to have to cut, which services we're going to have to cut as well as look at the fare increases, which goes down into a spiral, effect of higher fare increases, then people can't afford it, then then that goes down to then operations have to be reduced and everything that goes along with it. So it's definitely a path that we don't want to get into. That's why we're working a lot on expanding the system and trying to bring in about $1.5 billion into additional revenues for the system. And that's sort of some of the work that our Director of Government Affairs is working on along with his team. Next slide, please. If we're going to skip this one and the next one, yeah, if we can go to this. Thank you. So the greater risk that we're facing right now is not taking any action, right? And we've been pushing for legislation to take action by the spring of 2025. There's a few reasons for this. There's a lot of federal requirements. If we're going to cut services, that the service boards have to do a lot of hearings, that they have to do a lot of planning, they have to do a lot of reporting to the federal government in terms of who is going to be impacted, as well as any new sales taxes that has to be implemented or any kind of revenue will take time. There's a lot time lag, right, when we're going to get this funding. So we're pushing for that to happen in spring of 2025 so that we can be prepared for when the fiscal cliff hits in 2026. As we mentioned, or Pace and Metro mentioned, the fiscal cliff is going to hit, and John, CFO at Metro, presented the number of 93 million that is going to be remaining for Metro in 2026. Again, we're going to see CTA hit the cliff earlier than Metro and Pace, but that is happening within 2026 as things are being forecasted right now. If we can go to the next slide. So some of the legislative agenda items that we have included. So again, I mentioned the $1.5 billion annually. We know that funding the operations as currently the system is set up is going to be beneficial. However, that's not going to be enough for the system that riders want, or some county board members have highlighted the need for bus service, for example, from a food pantry to or from the house, from somebody's house to their food pantry. So these are the kind of services that that right now even included in the fiscal, they're not included in the fiscal cliff, right? So that's why we're pushing for a higher amount so that we can actually envision the level of service that riders are demanding. One line that I'm not sure who I'm stealing it from, but one line was, in all of our surveys that we're doing, nobody has said we need less service. Nobody has said that. They're criticizing the level of service, which is, it's within the rights, and we understand why. But nobody has said, oh, we need to cut lines here, we need to cut services there. So again, that's what we're trying to show. If we can move to the next slide. Here, I'm not going to cover all the written remarks, but just that we have included additional information based on some of the events that took place in 2024 related to violence and crime and all that. So we have updated that in our line. On the 2025 legislative agenda, so again, the RTA is advocating for new operation funding, like we said, expanding, going from the 700 million to the 1.5 billion. We are also proposing a strengthened RTA. So for the RTA to have more authority, instead of having the conversation with consolidation, we believe that there is a good opportunity here for us at the RTA to have greater, broader oversight in certain areas. So we included fares, customer services, as well as monitoring and enforcing compliance, as well as the managing and oversight of the capital projects. Right now, we continue to say we, the RTA, come at the back end of all these processes that we have gone through. So our budgets come to the RTA once pretty much everybody has blessed them, right? So unless there is something that we can do early on in the process, then, and there's also continuing monitoring of these processes within the year that will make us a stronger RTA as well. If we can go to the next slide, and here all I'll say is that December 19th next week is when the boards or when the RTA board approves the budget or does a final review of the budget. Today is the last day for the public to submit comments to us, and we'll take that into account. We shared that with the RTA board members as well. The service boards presented last month on November 22nd, their budgets to the RTA board as well. At this point, again, I want to thank you for your time and giving us the opportunity to come out and discuss the how important public transit is for the region. And we'll be happy to take any questions. Again, I'll have Rob as well here, who's our Director of Government Affairs, who's in the middle of the conversations with Springfield as well, to answer any of these questions.
Thank you. Questions, Jackie Chenier?
Thank you. I just want to encourage you to keep working on that one pass that works for everything. As someone who travels quite a bit internationally and nationally, it's very confusing when you get into a new market for even a short period of time to figure out how that particular area's transit system paying works. Not the riding. You could usually find somebody to tell you which route to get on, or you could find an app. But just figuring out how to pay for things can be a little confusing sometimes. And I'm sure if it was a little bit easier, we'd have a lot more riders throughout the region. And then secondly, I hope as our new board moves forward, that we put together some legislative support for the RTA, both the idea of keeping the current governance board the way that it is so that we do have adequate representation on that board. And then secondly, to help with the fiscal cliff. I know we recently passed our legislation packet for the state, and I don't think recent was the feds. I don't think we've gotten to that one yet, but these two items really should be in there, and we're remiss for not having them in there. Probably should have been in there last year as well, because this conversation's been going on for a while. So great job. Great job, JD. Thank you for your representation for us. Much appreciated.
Thank you for those comments. Yeah, and I'll just add that on the integrated pass, there's no more collaboration in that space within the service boards and the RTA than that specific area. The only issue, again, as I mentioned, is technology is not there, but I totally understand what you're saying. Traveling and seeing how easy it is for an integrated pass on other public transit systems makes us, wish that we had something like that as well. And we do have integration on Ventra to a certain point, but your comment it's well taken.
I will say I have several Ventra cards in my drawer. And even learning how to use that system was not easy. And I think I don't use it enough, so that's part of the problem. But I think I got the app at some point and couldn't figure out how to make the card and the app work. And yeah, it was a couple of years back when I was commuting downtown, so.
Thank you, Jackie. Kelly?
Thank you, Speaker. Hi. Earlier this year, I went to the Illinois State Senate, had a series of hearings, and one of them was in Naperville. And I went and heard our county executive, among others, speak about the needs and the hopes and what was going on with transportation in our counties. If I remember correctly, there was an issue where Kendall County was urged to put something on a referendum because am I getting this right? Okay. Because we support you through sales tax, correct? There's the collar counties do. Does Kendall County support you in that way?
No, right. Rob will answer that comment for you or that
Okay,
question.
thank you. I'm sorry.
There has been conversations about, so the RTA region represents the 6 counties of northeastern Illinois, so Cook and the Collier counties. We do not extend to Kendall County, and there's been conversations about that as the county has continued to grow. Our general perspective on it is that there's a sales tax that's assessed in each of the counties in the RTA region, and that supports operations for the system. And so if the county would like to access the full system, that's something that they're going to have to contend with on the local level. So we would love to enlarge the system, but we obviously think that everyone who benefits from the system should contribute to supporting it.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Speaker.
You're welcome. And Dawn Bullock.
Just in your slide, agenda on 15, just wondering, eliminate the fare box recovery ratio requirement. Can you explain that?
Sure. So when the RTA was established in 1974 and then sort of updated in 1983 to just about all of what you see today was established in 83, there was a requirement inserted into the legislation that said 50% of the operating funding of the system needs to be collected from the fare box. So essentially fares that riders would pay must total 50% of the operations. What that did is sort of create a sort of what we would argue a negative set of incentives, because it forced the operators, CTA, Metro, and Pace, to focus on rides and lines that produce that level of ridership, right? And what happens in that scenario is that where you might have an emerging community that would like to have transit service, but they don't meet that 50% recovery ratio, then it makes it harder to meet the overall average. That the 50% requirement is system-wide. And so you have many CTA lines, many Metro lines, many Pace lines that are well above 50%, but you also have others that aren't. And so that sort of negative incentive sometimes can create transit deserts. And frankly, it's the highest recovery ratio that's ever been instituted for a major system in the United States. New York does not operate under that level of recovery ratio, and no real major peer system of ours does as well. We've gotten relief from the General Assembly since COVID to set that aside while we work to recover. There are better ways, frankly, to measure performance of the system. It was intended as an accountability, but we think there's better ways to demonstrate the systems are operating efficiently. And so we are continuing to seek relief from the recovery ratio.
And so that keeps you, or maybe not keeps you, but from going into other areas because you can't meet that.
You do a calculation on how well you're doing overall, and if there's some leeway there, then you can, okay, let's try and expand service in this area or that area. But yes, overall, if that drags the overall average down, then there's a financial penalty for the system, which again is a negative incentive. I don't want to expand service if I put funding at risk, right?
Any other questions, board members? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your presentation, and look forward to seeing your next annual budget next year.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So I think the moral of the story today with the 3 annual budgets is, we deal with all the time. There's a lack of funding, and just sitting up here listening to all 3 of the budgets, I think I came up with a simple answer. I do know that the Chicago Bears are looking to build a new stadium and want funding from the state of Illinois. And I would suggest that they do not do that until they can put a decent product on the field. So maybe there is some funding for you 3 until that happens. So anyway, it's my personal wish. Yes. That was not a motion, but maybe it should be. All right. Moving on then. Thanks once again, everyone. I don't see any other new business, so I would like to open up public comment relevant to matters under the jurisdiction of the county. Is there anyone from the public wishing to make a comment? Okay, seeing none. Announcements and reports by chair. I do I do want to say one thing, and I wanted to make sure that the entire board was here, and a lot of things were happening yesterday and didn't have this opportunity. So the folks that are here today, I would like to officially welcome our new Chief of Staff, Chuck Pelkey. Chuck has spent probably the last 2 decades in county government. He started off over at the state's attorney's office for years. And the last 6, I believe, was very instrumental in helping Lawrence Daly Ferry down in the clerk's office. I feel that Chuck knows a lot of the people around the county and will be able to work with them and also work with all the board members on the county board as well. So I'll make that announcement again when we do have a full board, but for those here today, welcome Chuck. So thank you. Unfortunately, we do not have a need for executive session, so I would look for a motion to adjourn. Motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Enjoy your rest of your morning, everyone. Thank you.